Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone watching us around the world. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Microsoft Meets the Community Windows Virtual Desktop Edition. This session is about MSIX App Attach. We'll take a deeper dive and we'll discuss some of the features. My name is Stefan. I'm a PM on the Remote Desktop Services team, and I own the feature MSIX App Attach in WVD. With that said, let's jump into our agenda. So I'm going to do a quick recap on MSIX, MSIX App Attach, and some of the terminology in this space. I am not going to cover the basics of MSIX App Attach. After all, this is a deep dive session. After that, we'll go into where we're supposed to be, the really expert part of this presentation. And finally, we'll talk about some of the product updates around both MSIX and MSIX App Attach. And I'm going to focus on a few selected ones. This is not intended to be a full-fledged discussion on product updates. So, recap of MSIX. This section is intended to be more of a clarification and removal of the ambiguities that exist around MSIX, MSIX App Attach, what's what. So let's start with MSIX. Depends to who you're talking to. MSIX can mean three different things. Can mean a combination of those three things. So it's a file extension, right? There is a .msix file format somewhere. If you download an application that's published as MSIX, that will be the format that you see if you are able to see the extensions. In addition to that, we have a lot of tooling to support MSIX, like the MSIX packaging tool, plugins for Visual Studio, the MSIX manager, the DevOps pipelines around MSIX. And finally, and probably the most important piece of this, is the runtime environment. In the Windows operating system, we have special bits, special code that enable MSIX. Without those, there's no MSIX, right? And when we have a .msix file being executed, we say that that package is running as an MSIX in an isolated environment. And that's what we mean. The runtime environment, it's an isolation, it's a form of a container that allows us to run the MSIX package, the application that's in that package. Now, what is MSIX App Attach? Quite often, especially for those of us that are not really into the developer space, more of the IT professional, IT admin sides, we think MSIX App Attach is the same thing. Well, that's not really the case. MSIX App Attach relies on MSIX, but while MSIX is the three things that we already covered, MSIX App Attach is the mechanism for delivering the MSIX package into your environment. Right now, the context of this conversation is your WVD. Maybe we can expand a little bit to the VDI environment in general, but that's what really it is. MSIX App Attach is Dynamic Application Delivery Mechanism. So when we're talking MSIX versus MSIX App Attach, that is a misnomer. There's no such thing, right? There's no MSIX App Attach without MSIX. It's an improvement, it's another implementation of the technology serving that vision that Microsoft has about MSIX, the future of application delivery, the future format for modern applications. Okay, with that said, let's jump into another big area of ambiguity. What's GA product ready, generally available, what's shipped, and what's not. So this will be, for some of you, this might be a trip down memory lane, but I have to do it in order to remove some of the confusion that I'm seeing in a lot of the community forums. So MSIX was shipped officially sometime November 2018. So now it's gonna be close to 2.5 years since we have MSIX. When it shipped in 2018, it was GA, meaning you can go that day and use it in production. or whatever you consider production. Conversation around is MSX product ready for rollout? The answer is yes. Is there work being done on MSX? Yes, there's going to be a lot of work done on the MSX format, but does not mean it's not stable and it's not ready to use. Okay, beat that horse enough. So, MSX App Attach. In the 2004 release of Windows, we added functionality to enable that dynamic application delivery mechanism that we called App Attach. When we shipped 2004, and once that release of Windows became available to everybody, MSX App Attach technically became available to everybody. So everybody can go and get that feature in the OS and use it. The challenge is that these are just set of APIs. There's no UI, there's no management mechanism. We do publish a set of PowerShell script that one can use to test and validate MSX App Attach. But that was it. I mean, it's still there. You can take any Windows version, 2004 or later, and you can do MSX App Attach without worrying about anything. The APIs are there. Now, what we're really interested in is MSX App Attach in WVD. We didn't want to have MSX App Attach in WVD and have you use PowerShell scripts or GPOs or both to manage App Attach. And for that reason, we started investing into a management UI part of the WVD portal in Azure. And that is something that we just released in mid-December last year. We released as a public preview. And when it's going to be GA, that will be later this year. We are aiming to be before June, but could be as soon as next month. And finally, to clarify, this is MSX App Attach in WVD. It's this experience here. The ability to go into the Windows Virtual Desktop portal in Azure, open a host pool, and specify here what MSX packages we want, add it to this host pool, specify then in our application groups what applications that might be in the MSX format we want available to our users, and finally assign those applications to our test users or our real users. That is MSX App Attach in WVD. With this said, I'm gonna finish the section on kind of removing the ambiguity. Hopefully it's clear now for a lot of us what we say when we mean what's GA, what's MSX, what's MSX App Attach. And let's do a deep dive. So the way I was thinking of doing this deep dive is literally like walking you through the process of setting up MSX App Attach in WVD. So we're going to start with expanding an existing MSX using the MSX Manager tool. We recently did some changes to it to support and to simplify the process. Then we'll talk about the MSX App Attach file share. There has been a lot of confusion of what needs to happen in the file share, how it needs to be configured. We'll talk a little bit about the certificates, why we need them, where they need to go. Then we'll actually go into the portal of MSX App Attach, the one that we just kind of briefly overviewed. We'll go add a package. We'll see a few errors, and we'll see how we troubleshoot those errors. So that last point, troubleshooting, will be all over the place, meaning we'll spread it around. Then we talk about the publishing of an MSX application, the assignment of an MSX application, and we'll wrap up with the remote app showing in the feed. So let's dive in. For that, I'll need one of my VMs here. So here I am on the VM that I'm gonna use to expand my MSX image. Obviously, I need an MSX package. Here it is, .msx. I need the MSIX manager, and I need to make sure my certificate is installed on this machine. Next step is open command prompt as administrator. I have already navigated from a previous session to where my MSIX manager is unwalled and unzipped. Excellent. Now here I need to type a very long command, and I don't feel like typing it. So I have created this cheat sheet available at MSIX Manager WVD. And here I'm going to use the sample command that I have provided for creating a sim file. Oops. Yeah, obviously it's going to fail because this is incorrect in my environment. This is a demo command, it's not going to work. First thing we got to replace is obviously the source package. So we're going to come here on the desktop, we're going to do right click, copy as path, and our source will be this. Now and then the destination, we're going to say mid, and then we're going to kind of, this is not going to work. Yeah, here we go. We're going to say same name, but the extension will be sim. So what did I do? I took a source package, I pointed to destination. I'm going to say apply echoes, very important for MSIX App Attach. I want to create a VHD. I'm going to put a size of 1200. Let's see. There's a rule of thumb. If you pack, it's 1 to 3. If your MSIX is 300 megabyte, your sim/VHD should be 3 times that. So in my case, it's almost 400. So let's be a little bit conservative. And then I'm going to say sim, obviously, as the file type I'm looking to get. Let's go to the med folder, and you can see there's nothing there. So we're going to run this command. It's going to take about, I don't know, this size of an application, about 15-20 seconds. So while this is ongoing, I'm going to elaborate on the expansion process. So expansion is very trivial. We take the MSIX package and we unzip it. But we also apply certain echoes to make sure that it is correctly recognized by the OS and it's not being compromised. You can see successfully created a sim file. Let's go into the folder, and here hopefully it's visible at this resolution. We do have a sim file. Well, technically we have 7 files. We need to move this sim file to our storage account. The storage account has been already added to my domain controller. It has been synced to Azure AD, and I have been able to mount it on this machine in the context of the admin. So we're gonna grab this folder and we will move it to, as stated earlier, our storage account. Now this is going to take some time as it's copying. Let's review the setup of the storage account. For that, I'll go to Azure portal. Now in the Azure portal that we have here handy, we're gonna look in our storage account. We're gonna find the MSIX file share storage account. Here we look in the file shares. And if everything is correctly, yeah, my MSIX file share, you can see our folder MAD, and yep, our 7 files have, well, so far seems like 6 files have been moved. Let's give it a try. Oh, excellent, 7 files. It's good when things work out. So we have our storage account joined to the domain controller, sync to Azure. Now let's look at the Ntfs. Let's look at the RBAC permissions on the storage account. But before we make sense of these RBAC permissions, we need to talk about the following. I have my VMs that need to access the storage account. Those VMs need to be domain joined. That means on my domain controller, I need to have my machines. So if we go into the domain controller, and here under tools, users, and all that good stuff, we're gonna find eventually, when it loads, we're gonna find a bunch of objects, computer accounts, etc., etc. Now, this will be pretty noisy. I have a lot of things here. But the first step of setting up a storage account with MSIX App Attach is you gotta make sure that your domain machines are here somewhere, right? Now, all my machines recently start with Stefan Georgiev, so you can see I have a bunch of them, okay? Now, next step after I confirm that my machines are domain joined and they show in the domain is to create a group, and in that group add all the machines that are part of my host pool. So let's go and find this group, and for me that group is under users, and I have called it UPDFS logic for some not very clear reasons. It's a test environment. So let's look at members, and you can see I have a bunch of computers, right? Computer objects that are being added to this group. Now, okay, so I have a group, I have my machines added here, so you can see 1026, 1027, etc., etc. Back into the portal, and we go into Azure Active Directory. I better see that group, because if I don't see that group, if I go into the groups, few more than I would expect, but UPDFS logics, and here you can see I have 15 devices. Now, we have seen situations in the private preview of MSIX App Attach where group is created in the domain controller, machines have been added to the main controller, but they don't show up here because the sync hasn't happened. That is very important. The sync must happen. If you don't see your devices here as members, the permissions are not going to work. So we have 1026, we have 1027, 1019, excellent. Okay, so now this group, the UPDFS logic, must be granted the RBAC permissions on our storage account. The way we're going to do this is obviously go back into the storage account, find MSIX file share, here access control and IM, and I'm going to pretend that I haven't done it before, but I'm going to do row assignments. Now, SMB reader contributor, it's fine. In production, you should be aiming for reader. I'm going to go for contributor. And then here I'm going to say UPD FS logic. Okay. And it will probably around and tell me that you already have this permission applied. Yeah, perfect. Then I need to go to either my domain controller or my session host, and I need to do the next piece of what's covered at this link, aka.ms/MSX App Attach, which is assigning the Ntfs permissions. And so far, people are very good in doing one or the other, not both. I know it's challenging, and there are some things that our friends in Azure Files are working to simplify. But we need to go and grant the Ntfs permissions. You already see me copying files here, so I obviously have granted the Ntfs permissions. If we go into the security, we can scroll down here, and you can see the UPDFS logic has modify, read and execute, list folder, etc., etc. That means that this machine account, and this is the key distinction here, is that the machine account has permissions on the file share. Okay, so question is, what is this machine name? I don't remember. Oh, so this is 1026. Excellent. So now, to recap, we expanded our MSIX into a SIM. We uploaded our SIM to a storage account. The storage account has been properly echoed, both RBAC and Ntfs. And now what we need really is the path to our SIM file. And once we have this path, we should be able to go into the Azure portal and move on with adding this MSIX package to the host pool. Now, before we go and do that, I would like to show you how this is gonna look when broken. So off to the Azure portal. So back into the Azure portal, I am gonna be looking into the Windows Virtual Desktop tab. Now, I know for a fact the 2219, it's a slightly different operating system. Why am I telling you that? There is a method to the madness. So here are on our host pool, we have healthy machines. We see the MSIX packages tab. So we're gonna say add, and then we'll provide the path to the SIM file that we just uploaded. Storage account path, meaning it starts with the storage account name, then it has the traditional files, file.core.windows.net, then the folder, etc., etc. And now that we have this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go click and add, and then we'll see what happens. And we see the message that the operation has failed. It timed out. Because these VMs in the host pool, they're actually a slightly different operating system that is supported by MSIX App Attach. And here I'm going to navigate to that machines, and you can see this is a Windows Server machine. So this is one very important reminder. MSIX App Attach is supported on Windows 10 Enterprise, Windows 10 Enterprise for multi-session 24 and up. Okay, so 0219 obviously is not going to work. It's missing the logic. Let's go and try host pools that we saw that it's working, and that will be the 1026. So I'm going to go to 1026. Now one of the machines is unhealthy. That is okay, as long as there is at least one healthy machine in a host pool. We will be able to do the addition of an MSIX package to that host pool. We need a healthy host because when we add a package from the UI is talking to the backend, to the RD broker. The RD broker is talking then to the RD agent. And the RD agent needs to be able to go access the file share, grab that MSIX image, verify its validity, and then provide us the information that's inside that MSIX image. And if there is no healthy host, that is not going to happen. So one is better than nothing. So we're going to go to MSIX packages. Here we can see that we already have some. So let's go ahead and add a few more. So we're going to click add. We're going to provide the same path. We'll click add one more time. And we can actually see that whole process taking place. So our agent on the host, the one healthy host that we have in this host pool, was able to access the file share, parse it, and see that there was one valid MSIX package. And from there, was able to recognize what applications are there, was able to figure out the version. Now we're gonna make this one active, we're gonna add it, and we're just gonna sit around and wait. So on this machine, on this host pool, we can see that we have only one healthy machine. The other one has actually been turned off. And that machine is the 1026. So let's go back to that 1026 machine and take a look. So here you can see that the 1026 machine is letting us in. This is through RDP, as I would like to show you another nuance of using SIEM and MSIX App Attach. Here are we on the machine. First thing I would like to do is come to the disk management. And you can see actually it doesn't have that many volumes mounted, right? Now, if this machine was doing MSIX App Attach, it will have a bunch of machines, bunch of VHDs mounted here. And this is the disclaimer. It doesn't. Why it doesn't? Well, we just added our SIEM, right? But guess what? That SIEM actually does not show up in the disk manager. Why? Because it's a new file format and the disk manager has been there since, I don't know, since when there was Windows. So if we however go to mount vol and we run this, you can see that there's actually quite a few volumes that have been mounted to this machine. And each of these volumes, since this is my test environment, actually represents a different SIEM package mounted on this machine. We can grab one of them, open it, and this is the little trick here. I'm gonna do run, and you can see this is actually one of the FileZilla packages that we have available here. Excellent. So why FileZilla? Well, if you look at our packages, there is a FileZilla that is supposed to be available. Now, our Microsoft Edge dev, it's not going to show up right away. It's going to take up to 5 minutes for that package to show in either mount vol or in the disk manager. Since this is a SIEM, it's not going to show up in the disk manager. Okay, so we've added the application published fine because we had the permissions correctly set up. Now let's talk about the certificates. We were able to add the MSIX package to this host pool because the certificate that we signed this package with is available on this machine. Why is this important? Well, all MSIX packages have to be signed. If they are signed with a private certificate, that certificate must be available on the machine. And not only available, but it has to be stored in the trusted people. Not in trusted publisher, not in local root, in trusted people. And eventually it cleared out. So if you go into the trusted people, here it is, WD Cantoso App Attach. That's the one that I've been using lately because it expires in December. Okay, so we talked about expanding, we talked about the file share, we talked about the certificates, we added our package to the host pool, and at this point you'll be thinking we're good to go, right? We have our user connecting through the WD web client. He or she will be able to see this application in their feed. Well, things are slightly more complicated. We don't want every user that gets to this host pool to see this application. Maybe this host pool has remote apps as well. So this is where the next steps in the process come in. So we will need to navigate back to the Azure portal and make sure that our packages are active. So we do have some active packages here, and kind of a slight tangent. If your Azure Files are giving you too much of a trouble the process that we have outlined at aka.ms/msx app attach storage is too complicated, nothing stops you from testing your packages from a local share. So in this case, we can see that the file 0, for example, was actually mounted from a VM, from a traditional SMB. And similar to FS logic, MSIX App Attach doesn't take a dependency on the storage type, as long as we have one. Okay, so we have packages added to the host pool. Now we need to associate those packages to an application group. In this particular host pool, we have only remote desktop. So let's go in there. And you can see something that should be somewhat new to you. Desktops now have applications inside. That's interesting, right? So we're going to go into the applications, and we can see already here that some of our applications, some of our MSIX are apparently showing up here. Why is that? Well, MSIX App Attach is, again, a dynamic application delivery technology. We don't really care if you're doing a remote app or remote desktop. For that matter, if you go to a host pool that has remote apps, and from here, we're going to take it to the next step. We'll press add. Now, what the WVD portal is doing is enumerating all the MSIX packages that we have. You can see it's actually listing only the active ones. Well, maybe you can't see it, but we had 5 packages available. One of them was inactive. The other 4 were active. So we're going to select Edge, and we're going to say Edge. Well, we were calling it Microsoft Edge for developers. And we're going to click Save. And now you will be like, this seems like we're ready to go, right? We should be able to access our remote desktop and get the application that we just added. Well, it's slightly more elaborate, and we all know this from just classic approach to WVD. We still need to do the assignment. That means we have to add our user to this group, right? And I have a bunch of users, and I'm not going to really do this, but you know how it goes. We click add, and we add, I don't know, let's add Adele. And now, when Adele goes to the broker, through the client, goes to the broker, requests her feed, the session host desktop that shows up in her feed will have MSIX App Attach enabled. But also, very important, Adele is gonna log in at least 5 minutes after we have done the assignment. Why is that? It's because for the V1 of MSIX App Attach, we don't check every minute or every 10 seconds. We check every 5 minutes if a new MSIX package has been added to the host pool. So after the 5-minute interval has passed, Adele logs in. At this point, the package has been staged, and now it's being registered to Adele. And we already checked the certificate, so there's not likely to be a problem with the certificate. So let's talk about the remote app. Now, in this resource group, we don't have a remote app. So what we're gonna do, we are going to go to another host pool. Let's go to the 1020. And this host pool has, again, 1 machine unavailable, should be fine. Right, we're gonna go to application groups. You can see that there's a remote application group. There are no applications assigned, that's fine. Let's go and fix this. We're gonna click the add button. Oh wow, what's happening here? this host does not have any healthy machines. Well, this is a session on troubleshooting MSIX App Attach and not on troubleshooting unhealthy host pools. But let's take a quick look here what's going on. We'll click on the session hosts. Oh yeah, well, one is unavailable, most likely turned off to save on cost, and the other one is upgrading. So expected, remember, requirement of MSIX App Attach, at least one healthy session host. Let's go and try another host pool. We'll go into the list of all the host pools, and here I would like to go to the 219. Okay, says 2 machines, 0 unavailable. Seems like they are healthy. Yep, perfectly healthy. And we're going to come here into the MSIX packages tab, blade, whatever the correct term is. We'll click add. We'll paste our path, the .sim file for Edge that we created. We'll say add. Now again, this handshake is happening, and then we get a nice big red error message. What the error message says? The error message says error accessing the virtual disk. And this is usually where we claim that the setup has been done correctly. We have tested it, everything worked fine, but not really. Remember, we had a particular group of computer objects that we need to use to assign the permissions. Now, this is a recurring theme, and I keep talking about these permissions because right now 70+% of the escalations for MSIX App Attach are tied to this message. Let's go and look at our domain controller and see what's happening there. So on the domain controller, we know that we have our, actually it's still open, our UPDFS logic groups. This was the one security group that we were using to assign both the Ntfs and airbag permissions. And it's not gonna work if you tell me, well, I assigned the host directly, or you tell support. It's not gonna happen. Let's come here, look at the members. Do we see 0219 St. George 0219 as a member of this group? I don't see it. What does that mean? That means that this host pool, the machine identity of this host pool, does not have the permissions that it needs to access the file share. It's somewhat trivial as a problem once we understand that we must be using a security group and it must be assigned both RBAC and Ntfs permissions. Okay, so you're gonna say, oh, excellent. That's a no-go. Let's go, and then I'm gonna follow your advice, Stefan. I'm gonna go and instead of the FS Logic storage, Azure Files storage account, I'm gonna use the a local file share on one of the other VMs. In this situation, it's the domain controller, and I have already copied that same sim file to this file share location. We'll get there, and now we get like some weird error, like unable to load DLL SimFS. And probably at this head, if you were me, like the first time I saw this message, your head explodes. It's like, what's wrong? The host pool is healthy. The permissions are correct because we checked everybody has permissions on the file share on domain controller. Let's look at the session hosts again. Yes, I want to leave. They seem to be healthy, right? There's nothing wrong with them. Let's double click in here, look at the VMs a little bit. Well, right here is the problem. This is a Windows Server 2019. This was mentioned at one point or another. We need 2004 or up. Okay, no go here as well. So Maybe we should try another host pool. Okay, yeah, we have plenty of those. I don't know if you've seen my test environment. So I'm gonna grab one of these little host pools here. And we're gonna use doesn't really matter which path, 2 machines. Let's make sure they're not Windows Server first. Learning from our mistakes, Windows 10 Enterprise, excellent, excellent. We'll go back into the host pool and we're gonna go into MSIX App Attach and we're gonna say what we're gonna say. We're gonna add a package. We'll press here, we'll paste here the path. We'll give it a minute to do that handshake from the UI to the broker to the agent. And now we get the second most common error. App contains untrusted signature. What does that mean? Well, I'm repeating myself, but it's an important point. Applications signed with a private certificate need to have that private certificate installed on the machine in Trusted People. We actually have an article for that. Well, it's a section of an article and it's available at the following link. aka.ms/MSX App Attach cert. So we kind of covered pretty much everything but the disclaimer about the remote app. So let's go and take a look at it. So I'm gonna use Edge Dev, but on my local machine, and so I'm gonna sign in with one of my test users that has been assigned to both remote apps and remote desktops in this environment that we've been using. Well, we do have a disclaimer for the public preview that remote apps are not really supported because we have Azure Front Door and the concept of rings in production. So if your host pool is always stationary, the way that traffic gets routed, it's not always the same. So if for some reason Azure Front Door decides to forward your traffic through our ring 1 or the production ring, then your feed is not aware of MSIX App Attach, hence it's not showing in the feed here. So the best example will be the 1027 host pool. In my environment, I actually have quite a few applications assigned as remote apps here that are right now not showing for this user because they're MSIX App Attach and the broker in production ring 1, the production environment, it's not able to honor this. So far we looked at some of the setup and configuration and challenges with MSIX App Attach, some of the limitations of the public preview, some of the limitations of the implementation for V1, and finally I would like to discuss what's coming for MSIX App Attach. And with that said, we'll switch back to the presentation. The final section of this presentation is going to cover what new features are coming to the MSIX App Attach stack. The reason I'm calling it the MSIX App Attach stack is because really we have so many interlinked components that are working together to deliver the MSIX App Attach functionality that we cannot really decouple those and talk without the context of the other. So first of all, MSIX. So John Winzel from the DXP team has published a great tech community post with all the new features that are coming. That one deserves a session by itself, so I have the link here. We also saw some of the challenges with Azure Files. So there are certain improvements that the Azure Files team is looking at to simplify the process, primarily of setting up certain default permissions that can make the whole experience much easier. Now, when we're talking of MSIX App Attach all up, meaning that not directly the implementation in WVD, Ntfs, we haven't announced an official GA for that product, mainly because there are some opportunities for improvement there that we are looking to address. if you are going to production with MSIX App Attach, for the time being, VHD, VHDX is your choice. SimFS will be coming later this year, before May, June. MSIX Manager, I want to call out, this is a great tool that has simplified the process of expanding an MSIX to an MSX image. You saw it in action earlier in this presentation. And finally, when we're talking about MSIX App Attach in WVD, the portal UI for managing MSIX App Attach in WVD will come GA, again, same timeline as MSX, as SimFS, May, June, might be sooner. So stay tuned for that one. Really looking forward. Performance improvement. With all honesty, so far we haven't invested in the performance improvement of the MSIX App Attach. We've done some work on the MSX side, but there is a lot of things we can make better in the MSX App Attach process, and we're looking to address those, particularly when it comes to the implementation in WVD. Doesn't mean that some of those are not transferable to MSX App Attach. Finally, and this will be really delivering on that promise of the fully dynamic application delivery. Today in WVD, there's a limitation of one desktop application group per host pool. That severely limits the flexibility of MSX App Attach. And there is an article on our tech community explaining how we can use remote app groups in conjunction with desktop application groups to allow us that flexibility of having one host pool where all users have access to the remote desktop, but with different set of applications. So there are some caveats with that implementation, and it is something that we are looking to fix. With that said, I want to say thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please feel free to follow up with me over social media.